Alright, I'm just gonna go weiter with my sin. Alright, let's see. Ooh, somebody started a groove. 1 second. Hey friends, what's up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Chav Gimel of Masechta Beitzah. So first we continue talking about burning the incense on Yom Tiv, continuation from yesterday, and we discussed Tudus Ish Romi. Of course, we can't mention a Gdimu Kulas without mentioning our friend Tudus Ish Romi, so we'll get there as well. I think it's probably the third time that we're encountering Tudus Ish Romi. They came up in Brachis, in Psachim, and now here in Beitzah. Maybe also we've seen him in another place and I forgot about it. Then we learn about 3 places where Elazar ben Azariah was lenient. Elazar ben Azariah is Gishmak. I feel like Elazar ben Azariah doesn't come up all that often, so it's nice when he does. Let's go weiter. So 3 lines from the bottom of Daf Chav Beis Amud Beis. Iboilu, they taka ask a kasha. Ma'ula ashen. So this is very interesting, the Maaseh. The Gemara asks, can you smoke fruits on Yom Tif? Now, apparently you smoke, take different spices and you smoke the fruits with the spices. Is this like a thing that we do nowadays? Do you smoke fruits? I don't know. I feel like if you did, then that would be something you can find like Shuk Machne Yehuda. I don't know. I feel like I don't really see that. Alright, anyways, smoking fruits. So Yibarilu Ma'ala Ashin, can you smoke fruits on Yom Tif? Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba Omer Rab. So it says Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba in the name of Rab. Osir. No go. Shmuel Omer Mutter. Shmuel says Mutter. You're allowed to. Rav Huna Omer Osir. So Rav Huna explains why Rab says Osir. Oh, wait, did I do the whole... 1 second. Hey everyone, welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Chav Gimel of Masechta Beitzah. Did I do that? Well, that's kind of important. We're learning Daf Chav Gimel of Masechta Beitzah, in case I didn't say, and we're starting at the bottom of Chav Beis and Beis. Back at it. Rav Huna Amar Osir, Mipnei Shemechabe. So Rav Huna says that you're not allowed, that Rav says that you're not allowed to smoke the fruits, because when you put the incense onto the coals, you're shtickle extinguishing the coals. And as Rashi actually said on the previous daf, B'chibur b'Yom Tov lo ishtri, you're not allowed to extinguish a fire on Yom Tov. You can, you can't extinguish a fire on Yom Tov. So Rav Huna says, look, you're not allowed to put the incense on the coals and smoke the fruits, because when you do, you're going to be extinguishing the coals of shtickle. Omer Rav Nachman. So Rav Nachman says to Rav Huna, V'nei mamar mipnei shemavir. But why don't you say that there's another thing going on? After the incense is put on the coals and extinguish the coals of shtickle, then the coals overpower the incense and start burning up the incense. So it's also mavir, you're also burning. Omerle, to which Rav Huna responds to Rav Nachman, Tchilasu mechaber v'sofa mavir. While you're right, but first the coals get extinguished to shtickle, and only then do they start burning. So therefore we go with the first one, which is extinguishing. Omer of Yehuda agabe gacheles osir. Says of Yehuda, look, it would not be allowed. You would not be allowed to burn the incense on coals. However, agabe cheres mutter, you would be allowed to burn the incense on hot earthenware. So if you have very hot earthenware, you'd be able to put incense on that. And while it might burn the incense, nonetheless, says Rashi, it would be by way of a shinoi, so there's no extinguishing, and even the burning is kind of in a different way, so it would be okay in this case. Okay, fine. Rabba Omer al gabi cheres nami. Also, as Rabba says, you wouldn't be able to burn the incense on earthenware either, mishum de kamolid reicha, because it would sort of what's the word I'm looking for? It would I don't know. I feel like there's a very nice word for like when you put something else into something else. Like, so meaning the fragrance of the incense would get into the, infuse, I think is maybe the word I'm looking for. It would infuse the cheres it would infuse the earthenware with fragrance, with the incense. And therefore, that would be a problem. It would be right? What does it say? To come molid reicha. You're like creating something that wasn't there before. Before it was just a plain piece of earthenware, and now you're infusing it with this fragrance, and now, there's fragrance in the earthenware which was not there before. So that is going to be a problem, says Rabbi. Rav Yosef Damitarvayu, say both Rabbi and Rav Yosef, For the same reason, sachufe kasa ashiroi biyomatavo osir, that to take a cup, like a fragrant cup, and to overturn it on like garments and stuff on Yom Tiv is osir. It's not allowed. My time outcome mishum dikamolid reicha, for the same reason that you are infusing the garment with fragrance, right? Even as we said yesterday with the machlokas between Rabban Gamliel and the Chachamim about the mugmar, about the incense, that right, the machlokas is about can you burn incense, but everyone agrees that you would not be able to sort of burn incense to make the clothing fragrant on Yom Tov. But 1 second, Frekti Gemara, why should overturning a cup on a garment to infuse the garment with fragrance be any different than taking a fragrant branch and rubbing it to bring out the fragrance, or cutting it to bring out the fragrance, assuming that it was already disconnected from the tree? Well, the Gemara answers that there's an afkamina. It's different. When it comes to the piece of the fragrant wood that you're rubbing or cutting in order to release the fragrance, so the fragrance is already darting. You just need to sort of collect it. But over here, when it comes to a garment that has no fragrance whatsoever, here you're actually creating something that was not there before, which is you are infusing this fragrance into the garment, and now the garment has something that it didn't have before, which is its fragrance. Rava Amr says, Rava, you're even allowed to burn the incense on the coals, no problem. Just like you're able to put meat on the coals, and that would be okay. We're not concerned about infusing the coals with the flavor of the meat. So here also, you'd be allowed to, burn the incense on the. You'd be able to burn the incense. You'd be able to burn the incense for the fruits, right? So he holds like Shmuel that you'd be allowed to smoke the fruits on Yom Tif, and there's no problem in terms of extinguishing and burning and imparting flavor into the coals, just like you're able to put meat directly on coals. So you can also put the incense on the coals in order to smoke the fruits. Darish Rav Gvia mi Beikosil a pischo deverish gelusa. Wow. So Rav Gvia from Beikosil, he darshaned on the entrance of the Reish Gelusa. Wow. What did he say? No. Ketura shari. That's what he said. Ketura is allowed. Amle ameimar my ketura. Ameimar says to Rav Gvia, what's ketura? Ketura bidi, if it means to pleat pants. To pleat pants, what do you want me to tell you? If you have like pants and you want to put pleats in, you're pressing the pants to pleat them. Maybe that's what ketura is. But if that's the case, maisa umanu, it's professional work, and professional work on Yom Tiv would not be allowed. Ve'ila ashen, and if we're talking about to smoke produce, well, osir doka mechabe. It's not going to be allowed because you're going to be extinguishing when you when you smoke the produce, because you're going to be putting the whatever the I don't know, fragrance whatever on the coals, and you extinguish the shtickle. Amli Ravashi. So Ravashi says to Ameimar la'olam la'ashen. Really, it's talking about smoking the produce. So why is it allowed? Mididava bisagumre. Just like you're allowed to put meat on the coals. So Memele, you could put whatever fragrance you need to onto the coals in order to smoke the produce. Ikadamr, to those who say Amr le Ameimar. Ameimar says to this Rav Gvia, my ketura. So what is this ketura? Ketura bide, if it means making pleats, my umanu, it's professional work and it shouldn't be allowed. Ila ashen, if we're talking about smoking produce, also it shouldn't be allowed to kamolid reicha because it's going to be making like going to be infusing fragrance, smell. So Rav Ashi says, Rav Ashi, ono amrisa niale mishmei degava rabba amrisa niale, and I said it to him. I said it to Rav Gvia in the name of somebody great. Lolam la'ashen. Really, we're talking about smoking. Umidi dahava bisa agumre. But just like you're allowed to put the meat directly on the coals, so you can also put whatever fragrance you need to directly on the coals, and it would be acceptable. Sounds very nice to me. You can make a goat that's roasted in this very fancy way with its entrails on the outside, and sounds very, very delicious. Tani Rabbi Yossi Omer says Rabbi Yossi Tudus ish Romi hiniges b'nei Romi lecho getimukulus b'leile psochim. That Tudus ish Romi, he would tell all the people in Rome that they can eat this kid roasted in the same way that a korban Pesach is roasted, that they would be allowed to eat that on Pesach night in Rome. Alright? Shalchule, they sent to Tudus, Umali Tudus ata, if not for the fact that you were the great Tudus, Gozanu alecha nidui, we would say that you should be excommunicated. Shata maichelas b'nei Yisrael kodshim b'chutz, that you're feeding the Yidden kodshim, korbanis, outside of the Beis Hamikdash. Kodshim sakadatich. What do you mean? How could you be feeding them kodshim outside the Beis Hamikdash? There's no longer a Beis Hamikdash. You can't be makdish a korban anymore. So what do you mean that eating? If you can't be makdish, then memeli you can't have kodshim. So elaima ke'ein kodshim. No, it's like kodshim. That you're feeding these people something that is similar to kodshim, and people might think that you can even make korbanos. What do I actually say? Somebody who sees it will say, "Oh, look, he was makdish a korban pesach," which is not true. So therefore, they said to this, you really shouldn't be doing this. But apparently, Rabbi Gamliel says that it would be allowed. So, all right. Sounds very nice. It says the Mishnah, all right? There are three things that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says is mutter, and Chacham says osir. What are these three things? Paraso yotza b'ritzua shebein karnel. That Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah's cow would go out with a red piece of wool or something red between its horns, and that was like a very nice thing. And you can comb an animal on Yom Tov, even though it might bleed. And you can grind up peppercorns in their grinder on Yom Tov. Rabbi Yehuda Omer says, you're not allowed to comb an animal with a metal comb on Yom Tov because it might make a chabura. Now, of course, Rabbi Yehuda, we know from Masechta Shabbos holds davar she'ein miskaven is also. So even though it might not always make the animal bleed, but if sometimes it might make the animal bleed, well, that's going to be a problem because even if it's not intentional, it's still also. Rabbi Yehuda holds davar she'ein miskaven is also. But you can use a thick wooden comb that's certainly not going to make the animal bleed. Whereas the Chacham say that not only are you prohibited from using a metal comb, a fine-toothed metal comb, you even are unable to use a thick wooden comb. The Gemara is going to explain why. It says the Gemara, friends, the Mishnah had said that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah would allow his cow to go out with this decorative thing between its horns. Friends, who's Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah? Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, the billionaire. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, as the Gemara is about to say, that we learned in Masechta Shabbos? Yeah, Masechta Shabbos? Wait, why am I, what? Yeah, of course, Masechta Shabbos. Yeah, Masechta Shabbos and Daf Nunei, Amud Beis. That says about Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, V'amar Rav V'amrila, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Tleiser Alfei Egle Hava Meiser Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Me'idju Kol Shata V'Shata. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah would separate 13,000 calves as his Meiser Behem every year. That means that his total flock every year was 130,000 calves. Now, if you do the math and try to figure out how much, I don't know, how much does a calf cost? I imagine that 130,000 times whatever a calf costs is probably some very nice amount. So, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah didn't just have one cow, let's just say that. So, Tana lo shelo oiso, it wasn't his. Ella shel shchento oiso, it was his neighbor's. But because he would allow his neighbor's cow to go out with this decorative thing between the horns, it was as though it was his cow. He gets sort of his name associated with it. And we can use a fine-tooth comb on an animal to comb an animal on Yom Tiv. The rabbis taught Ezu Kerud ve'Ezu Kirtzuf. What's considered this Kerud and what's Kirtzuf? Kerud Ketan Vosin Chabura. Kerud is with like a fine-toothed metal comb, and it can make the animal bleed sometimes. Kirtzuf Gedolim ve'ein Osin Chabura. Kirtzuf is a wooden comb that is thicker and doesn't make the animal bleed. And there's a three-way machlokas around this, as we saw in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and the Chachamim. Rabbi Yehuda savar davar she'ein miskaven osur. Rabbi Yehuda, of course, we know from Masechta Shabbos, holds that davar she'ein miskaven is osur. So therefore, if you use a fine-toothed metal comb that may sometimes make the animal bleed, well, that's davar she'eino miskaven, and that's going to be also. Therefore, it says you're not allowed to use a fine-toothed comb. However, miu kerud kitanim. Oh, what? Fine. So miu kerud kitanim va'osin chabura. So whereas the kerud is with a fine-toothed metal comb and it might make a chabura, kirtzuf gedolim ve'nosin chabura. V'lo gazunan kirtzuf atu kerud. But kirtzuf is with a large wooden comb that does not make a chabura ever, does not make the animal bleed ever, and therefore he says, look, you can use the thick wooden comb, and he says, from the fact that you're not allowed to use the fine-toothed metal comb, we're not going to say, well, you can't use a wooden tooth comb either, as a gezerah. No, it's fine. Don't use the fine-toothed metal comb, but you can use the thick wooden comb. So while the rabbis agree with Rabbi Yehuda that davar she'eino miskaven is in fact forbidden, however, because they said, look, if you're not allowed to use the fine-toothed metal comb, we also don't want you using the thick wooden comb either. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah savar lok Reb Shimon, whereas Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah holds like Reb Shimon, the Amar davar she'eino miskaven mutter, who says that something that is unintended is permitted, and therefore, if you're going to be using the fine-toothed metal comb, and sometimes it might lead to bleeding, but the other times it won't. So it's what's considered davar she'eino miskaven, and that's permitted, like Reb Shimon says. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah holds like Reb Shimon, uvein kerud uvein kirtzuf shari, and therefore, both using a fine-toothed metal comb as well as a thick wooden comb are both acceptable means of combing your animal. Fine. Omar Rave, Omar of Nachman, Omar Shmuel, Va'amrila, Omar of Nachman l'chudei. Okay, it says Rave, the name of Nachman, the name of Shmuel. Some say it was Taka, just of Nachman said. Halacha Reb Shimon, that halacha is like Reb Shimon, that davar she'eino miskaven is mutar. Sharei Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah modulei. Because Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah holds like him. Omar Rave of Nachman. So Rave says of Nachman, wait a second. But then my halacha Reb Yehuda sharei chachamim modem lo. Rav Nachman, wait a second. Why are you saying that the halacha is like Reb Shimon, that davar she'eino miskaven is mutar, because Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah holds like Reb Shimon? Why don't you say the halacha is like Reb Yehuda, that davar she'eino miskaven is aser, because the chachamim, as we see in our Mishnah, hold like Reb Yehuda? That, right? It's stronger to say that you're going to hold like the opinion that the chachamim go like, rather than say the opinion that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah holds like. So Amalei, so Rav Nachman says, look, honor Reb Shimon severely. I hold like Reb Shimon. And also, Shari Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah modelo. Also, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah agrees with Reb Shimon, which is a plus. But I'm not holding like Reb Shimon because Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah holds like him. I hold like Reb Shimon. Also, Givaldi, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah holds like him. Says the Mishnah, Harichaim shel pilpulin tamei mishum shlosha kelim. So if you have a pepper grinder, so it can become tamei for 3 reasons. So the way that a pepper grinder would work, there would be the blade on top, that would be the metal grinder. You would then grind it into some kind of like sieve kind of area. So it was like another receptacle kind of thing, but it was kind of open, it was like a sieve on the bottom. So it would let the fine pepper go through, and whatever was thicker than that would stay on top. And then you have the bottom that would kind of store the ground pepper, what's it called? Ground pepper? I feel like that's a thing. So, fine. So mishum kli kibul. So the bottom section is like this receptacle where that holds onto the ground pepper. Mishum kli mateches. And then also from the top area, which is and the top area would be the grinder part. And umishum kli kavara, and the middle part would be sort of like a sieve kind of thing, and that would be also makabel tumah. So the bottom part is right makabel tumah because it's a kibul. The top part is metal, so it's makabel tumah, and the middle part is makabel tumah, just like a sieve is makabel tumah. Tana, it was taught in the Beitzah, tachtono mishum kli kibul. The bottom part would be a vessel that receives, and mishum kli kvar. The middle part would be like the sieve part, elyonim mishum kli matechas, and the top part because it's the metal grinder. It says the last Mishnah in the second parak of Masechta Beitzah, agola shel kohen tmei midras, a wagon that like a kohen, a young kid, plays with, tmei midras, can become tamei tumas midras. What's tamei tumas midras? Midras is if a fellow who's like a zav or something sits on epis, so it becomes an avatuma. So it's saying if this little kid was a zav and he's playing with his wagon, so the wagon could become tamei tumas midras. because he's leaning on it. When he tells b'Shabbos mishum deika Torah is kli alon, you can move it around on Shabbos. Oh wait, where am I? I'm sorry. I skipped to the Gemara. So just when he tells b'Shabbos, you could also move it on Shabbos. And if you want to sort of pull this wagon, you have to pull it on, you have to lay out a sheet, because you don't want to pull it directly on the ground, because you can make a furrow, and we don't want you to make a furrow on Yom Tov, on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Rabbi Yehuda Omer says, Rabbi Yehuda, kol hakelim ein negrarin chutz min ha'agola, mipnei shehi koveshes. To which Rabbi Yehuda says that, look, in general, you're not allowed to drag a vessel because it could make a furrow, right? But actually, a wagon is an exception, because when the wheels turn, they actually push down the ground. They sort of compact the ground, as opposed to plowing, which would be like actually moving the ground. But here you're just sort of compacting the ground. So therefore it would be acceptable. Says the Gemara, so the wagon of a cotton could become Tomei Midras because he puts his weight on it, he sits on it. When he tells b'Shabbos, it can be moved on Shabbos mishum deika Torah is kli ala, because it's a kli, it's a vessel, you can move it on Shabbos. And you can only drag and move the wagon on like a sheet of sorts. Agabe kelim in, agabe karka lo. So yeah, if it's on sheets or something, you can drag it, but if it's on the ground, you cannot. My time, how come? Because if you drag it on the ground, it's going to make a furrow, and lemaisa, it's going to be what's it called? It's going to be chorish, plowing, which is a problem. And because even though it's wheels, but the wheels can get jammed or something, and then you can make a furrow. Money, Rabbi Yehuda. So who's this? It's Rabbi Yehuda. Davar shein miskaven also, right? Who says davar shein miskaven is also, that even though in general the wheels will sort of be turning, and maybe they'll be compacting the ground, but if they get stuck, they're going to be making a furrow, and they might sometimes get stuck, and so davar shein miskaven, it's also. The Reb Shimon, davar shein miskaven mutter, because Reb Shimon after all holds that davar shein miskaven, something that's unintended, that ought necessarily happen, but it might happen, it's permitted. The Tana, as we learn in the Beitzah, Reb Shimon Omer says, Reb Shimon gorer adam mita kisiv v'safsul. A fellow could schlep on the ground a bed, a seat, a bench, as long as he doesn't intend to make a furrow. As long as he doesn't intend to make a furrow, says Reb Shimon, you can schlep it on the ground. So we're saying that from the fact that we're saying that you're not allowed to schlep this wagon on the ground, it must be davar shein miskaven is also, which is Rabbi Yehuda. But one second, Ema Seifa. But if we keep reading in the Mishnah, it says Rabbi Yehuda Omer and Akol Negroim b'Shabbos chutz min ha'agola mipnei shu koveshes. But one second, then the Mishnah immediately afterwards says Rabbi Yehuda that Yutaka are allowed to schlep this wagon on the ground because it just compacts the ground. Mipnei shu koveshes in aval choretz lo avda, but it doesn't make a furrow; it just compacts the ground. And a furrow moves ground. This compacts ground. So, but how can we say that that both the Reisha and the Sefer are both Rabbi Yehuda? Because after all, they argue on each other. How could Rabbi Yehuda be arguing on himself? And for the Gemara, Treitanoi ve'libud Rabbi Yehuda, that it's two teachers of Brises. One was saying that Rabbi Yehuda says this, the other one was saying that Rabbi Yehuda says that. What do you want me to tell you? All right, Hadron Alach Yom Tiv. So we just finished the parak Yom Tiv, and tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem, we're going to start the parak of Ein Sodom Dogum and Abivim b'Yom Tiv. Friends, that was Daf Chov Gimel of Masechta Beitzah. So the Daf began talking about smoking fruits on Yom Tiv. We saw the opinion of Machlokas Rav and Shmuel. Rav says that you're not allowed to smoke fruits on Yom Tiv because you're going to be extinguishing the coals when you add the incense, the spices to the coals. Whereas Shmuel says, look, it's fine, it's beseder, it's no problem. So chonefesh, davar shavel chonefesh, anybody can eat smoked fruits, and therefore it is beseder. And then we got into the question about, well, what if you use like a pottery, an earthenware, a very hot earthenware, and burn the incense that way? So you're not actually extinguishing anything. So says Rav Yehuda, that would be okay. But Rabbah says that no, that wouldn't be okay because you're infusing the smell into the earthenware. We said for that reason also you wouldn't be able to overturn a cup. Right? Rabbah and Rav Yosef say you wouldn't be able to take a fragrant cup and overturn it onto a garment because you'd be infusing the garment with the fragrance. But Rava says that when it comes, like Shmuel, that when it comes to burning, the incense to smoking fruits on Yom Tov would be okay. Just like you're allowed to take meat and put it onto coals, you're also allowed to take whatever spices and fragrance you'd be putting on the coals in order to smoke the fruits. We then saw that also Rabbi Gamliel had said that you're allowed to roast a kid in a manner similar to the Korban Pesach on Pesach night. And we then, of course, quoted the story of Tudus Ishromi that we're seeing at least for the third time, that he would allow the people in Rome, it says hinig, it was maybe even a custom davka in Rome, that they would roast this goat in this manner on Pesach night. And they sent him like, hey, if you weren't such a great guy, we would put you in excommunication. Then we saw a new Mishnah, 3 places where Elazar ben Azariah is lenient. One of them is that he would allow his cow to go out with a special ribbon, to which the Gemara asks, what do you mean? He only had 1 cow. Just as Meiser Be'ema every year was 130,000 calves. He had a lot more than that. He says, no, but because he would allow his neighbor to go out with that fancy ribbon on the cow's horns on Shabbos, so that's why he's associated with it. He had also said that that you'd be allowed to comb they'd be allowed to comb an animal on Shabbos and Yom Tov, even with a fine-toothed comb, even though it might make him bleed. And the Gemara says, because he holds like Reb Shimon, that Davar Shein Miskaven is mutter. Rabbi Yehuda says you're not allowed to use a fine-toothed comb because the animal might bleed, because of course Rabbi Yehuda says Davar Shein Miskaven is also. But he says you can use a thick wooden comb that definitely the animal won't bleed. And the Chacham say you can't even use a thick wooden comb because as out of concern of the thin metal comb. And finally, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says that you'd be allowed to grind up peppercorns on Yom Tov. And we then got to a new Mishnah that says that interestingly, a pepper grinder can have 3 things that would make it susceptible to be Makabel Tuma. One is the bottom part, that's a base kibble or receptacle. There's the middle part, which is like a sieve, and the top part is metal, and therefore it's Makabel Tuma for that. And we then said that a wagon that a child plays with is Mitami Tumas Midras, it's movable on Yom Tov. And then the Tanakama had said that, however, you're not allowed to schlep it on the ground on Yom Tov because it can make a furrow, but Rabbi Yehuda said that you are allowed to schlep it on the ground because it actually only compacts the ground. So interestingly, then the Gemara says, well, on the one hand, it's Rabbi Yehuda who says that you would not be allowed to schlep it on the ground because it might make a furrow, because Davar Shein Miskaven is also, but Rabbi Yehuda also is the one who's saying that it's allowed because it's only compacting the ground. So we say it's taka 2 tanas according to Rabbi Yehuda. Sounds very nice. Friends, that was Daf Chav Gimel of Masechta Beitzah. I hope you enjoyed. Cheers.